This week we talk about Electronic Arts, trouble at Commodore, and the great Atari fire sale of 1984. Plus, we'll talk a little bit about some mustaches and, did I forget something? Xerox.
Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I am Tyler Osby.
And today we're talking about Chapter 16, titled Album Covers.
Ooh.
From The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen L. Kent. Tyler, take it away.
Well, at this point, we got some new faces. We'll get into why the chapter is called Album Covers. I know we sort of teased it at the end of the last episode.
We teased.
We'll get in there. We'll get there. But first, I want to talk about some new faces in the industry a little bit here. So, and by faces, I mean people, not necessarily companies.
Well, they have faces.
Well, yeah, people have faces.
Mm-hmm, that's good.
Yeah. So Commodore at this point had surpassed Apple in terms of size and stuff. They were the first computer company to report $1 billion in sales. So they're really hitting the big time now. This is significant because Commodore wasn't selling the hardware at a loss and then making the money on the backside selling software like Atari did.
With the razors analogy.
Right. They weren't doing that. They owned every part of their pipeline, or as much as the manufacturing pipeline as they could, and so they were able to keep costs really, really low on the Commodore. So they made $100 billion. That would be huge.
That would be impressive.
They made $1 billion in sales, and their hardware was making a lot of profit for them. So
they're making money on everything.
Right. So they didn't have to. So this strategy also made it so they didn't have to stifle third-party development in the way that console manufacturers tried to. So Atari didn't want other people making games for their system because that's how they made money. They wanted to sell the games to their system. They didn't want to sell a system and then have somebody else make money making games for it. There's nothing in Atari for it.
Doesn't work.
But because Commodore made money off the hardware, they just wanted as many people to make games as possible for it. It was a win-win. So Trammell figured that every piece of software written for a Commodore was just another reason to buy a Commodore. So it was a win-win. One reporter thought that the Commodore could sell their computer. They sold it for $595 at the time. This reporter figured that they could sell it for $99 and still make a profit.
That's crazy.
They were making a crap ton of money. And even $99 in 1982 was about $255 in today's dollars. So think about buying a computer for that much, which you can do these days, but you're not getting a great computer these days.
This is the computer.
Yeah, this was the computer to get at the time, and it only costs about... it would have only cost about $255, I should say. So they didn't sell it for $99, but they could have sold it for $99.
They could have still made money, but they got to make the millions, the billion.
Got to make that Skrilla.
That's right.
Yeah, so it was pretty crazy. The Commodore had a tape deck and a cartridge slot.
Whoa.
Which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
It also had a floppy drive that you could buy for it. Floppy disks were great because they were cheaper and they held more data than both a tape or a cartridge. So cartridges were very fast. They didn't hold a lot of data. Tapes can hold a lot of data. They're very slow. So
the beautiful medium in the middle.
Floppy disks were great at the time. And we're talking 5.25-inch floppies, legitimately floppy. These
are the big ones.
Yeah.
The ones that had Oregon Trail on them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And because floppy disks were so cheap to make, anybody could release a game on a floppy disk. And so they did. Enter Electronic Arts.
EA
Sports.
Get in the game.
Big. Oh, man.
We played those too much, apparently. That's what we learned today.
So EA, Electronic Arts, is a company started by Trip Hawkins during the Commodore era. So they had a different thing going on where Atari, we wanted all their games to be made by Atari, and they didn't want people to know the individuals involved in making them. Just everything was made by Atari. Electronic Arts, when they started, had this cool ethos of we're going to celebrate the people that make these games, that design them, that do the art for them. So they they wanted to make these people like celebrities, kind of. So they would promote their game designers.
Plus, Trip Hawkins, pretty cool name.
What a great name.
It sounds like a character on MASH.
Yeah, Trip Hawkins. It does sound like a MASH.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So this was sort of the same way directors and actors right now are sort of celebrated in the film industry, right? You go see a Scorsese film that's directed by him, that means something, right? You don't just go see a Universal movie.
You listen to an Osby podcast.
That's right. You listen to Coletta.
That's right.
On the podcast.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, so Trip Hawkins had a marketing background. He was a little bit of a Steve Jobs kind of guy, except he fit in a little bit better with the business suits of the world. But he was a man with a vision and a passion for technology.
Some say about you, Tyler.
Wow.
What is it? The compliment corner? What's happening?
Yeah, wow. I've never been compared to Steve Jobs or Trip Hawkins before.
Well, you're just a man with a vision and a beautiful suit. Wow. You can't see it right now, but Tyler is wearing a full 3-piece suit.
Yeah.
Top hat, Monopoly monocle. He is twirling a cane while doing this read effortlessly.
Yeah, my mustache also does that cool thing.
It's waxed?
Yeah, it goes way out there. You can't see it, but that's what's happening.
Beautiful.
Right now.
I wish you all could see it right now.
Yeah. I wish my mustache could do that. Actually, I have a long family history of folks in my family with mustaches that can do that. Yeah, I don't know if they wax them, but their mustaches do that.
Just naturally?
Yeah, in my family history, and it's nuts. I didn't get that gene.
Pretty gnarly.
Yeah, that's all my dad's side of the family. I got my mom's genes.
Well, you never know. Maybe it'll change.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Yeah, okay. So, Trip Hawkins.
Just talking about mustache implants.
I need to augment my mustache. Trip Hawkins was Harvard educated, and he looked great in a suit. People magazine, actually, this was years later in 1995, they had him as one of their 50 most attractive people.
That's pretty hard to get into as a businessman.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed about businessman. Most of them pretty schlubby.
Yeah.
You heard it here first,
It's
folks.
true. You put you put your effort into a different part. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he was also one of the first 100 people at Apple. So he knew Jobs personally. That's probably where some of his Jobsness came from.
Like that Jobsness.
So, yeah. While at Apple, he had seen what a leader with a clear vision could do, and he wanted to bust out on his own and make it happen. He did some calculations in the late 70s of when he thought computers would be at the right time to make to be able to launch a software company like this. And it's not really known what the calculations were. He doesn't even remember it, but he's 1982. That's when computers will be good enough that I can start my own computer company and make games, and we're going to make a lot of money. And so he's working at Apple in the late 70s, but in the back of his head, he was 1982.
That's so weird that you prep that far ahead. I haven't planned that far ahead for anything in my life.
Yeah.
That's
so
nuts.
He helped launch the Apple II as a business computer, and he was with Steve Jobs on the trip to Xerox, where Steve ate the forbidden fruit and gained the knowledge of the future of computers. This is a side story that I want to tell that's more related to computers than video games.
I want to hear it because I have no idea what you just said. I'm interested.
So there is a story that is probably told in many different ways, but the gist of it is Steve Jobs went to Xerox, which was more than just a copy-making company at the time. They made computers and stuff like that. So he went to Xerox to learn about how they were building computers. This was before the Macintosh. This was before graphical user interfaces was a thing, with a mouse and stuff. And he saw the Xerox Park computer, which had a mouse pointer and a trash bin, and it was all graphical. The whole thing was graphical. And he was like, oh man, this is the future of computers.
And that's where he got it all from?
Yeah, that's where he got it. And I want to say Bill Gates did the same thing. We may need to fact check that.
They both stole from Xerox on the way?
Yeah. So there's a really famous, this is a sort of related story as well, where Steve Jobs confronts, because Microsoft beat Apple to market with Windows before the Mac came out. Windows wasn't awesome at the time, but they beat them to it.
They beat them. That's important.
And so there's this story of the time when Steve Jobs, being Steve Jobs, confronted Bill Gates and was like, dude, you stole from me this idea for this stuff. And he's like, well, really? It's more like we both had this rich neighbor named Xerox, and you broke in to steal the TV, and you got mad when you found out I broke in and stole it first.
Yeah.
It's well, nobody can get mad. There's a great movie called Pirates of Silicon Valley that sort of dramatizes that scene where Noah Wiley plays Steve Jobs, and he goes, you stole from me. It's so great.
I want to watch that movie.
It's actually a pretty fun movie. It has Anthony Michael Hall as Bill Gates, too.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's pretty strong cast of characters.
We need to watch
there.
this movie together.
It's fun. It was a made-for-TV movie on TNT or something.
That's probably why I never saw it.
Late 90s, yeah, 1999, I think. So anyway, that they went to Xerox. Trip was there on the trip to Xerox, which is pretty sweet. So
Trip's on a trip.
Trip went on the trip, and then Steve Jobs was tripping.
With Trip. Very confusing T-shirts.
Yeah, it's just a crazy time.
Because they had to make all the matching shirts. When people go to Universal, they did that for their trip to Xerox.
Right, yeah. So when Apple went public, Trip became a multimillionaire.
Whoa.
Freaking sweet. So he was good to go.
This guy had it all figured out.
He did. So he founded EA in 1982, just like he planned. The reason they named it Electronic Arts was to emphasize the artists that made the games. So at this point in time, computer games were being sold in plastic bags with like a floppy disk or whatever in them, and they just had a label on them, and they weren't very exciting. It was not great. So Tripp wanted to change that, and he really started putting art on these boxes because he was a marketing man and he wanted to market. The reason this chapter is called album covers is because that's what Tripp called the containers that sold EA's games. He would call them album covers. He's like, we need to have a really solid album cover like music has, you know?
Yeah.
So they had professional art and a real design team behind the boxes of the computers. Tripp knew the power of a good box and a designer's name on the box. So he figured it's not enough to have good games. You need to somehow attract people to these games. So you got to have a sweet looking box. So he had the best looking boxes, and they also made some pretty good games. They also did some changes with the deal structure that they had with retailers. Tripp did not want to pay as much to the retailers as other software companies were. Traditionally, at this point in time, the retailer would make about 55% of the
too much,
price.
if you ask me.
Yeah, it was too much. And Tripp was like, that's too much. And he banged his fist on the table and he said, I will give you 52%.
Whoa,
which
3% less.
Yeah, which doesn't seem like a big difference to me. That like it just seems like that's a point to just haggle over. But apparently, the one guy, Don Valentine, who was their big investor at the time.
We talked about with Atari.
Yep. So he had invested in EA, and when Tripp was like, hey, we're going to only give them 52%, Don Valentine was like, no, you can't do that.
What are you, crazy?
You're nuts. These people sell your product. You're going to make it so they won't sell your product. Well, the companies went for it, and Don Valentine shut up. And he was
got him.
Yeah, and he was like, you have got to keep challenging convention. That's like the phrasing that was used. So EA launched 6 games at the same time on May 21st, 1983, about a year later, almost a year after they started. 3 of these 6 games were major hits. We had Hard Hat Knack, a Donkey Kong-style game that was for the Apple II. It was basically the same thing as Donkey Kong.
But construction.
Right. So it was Hard Hat Knack. Archon, which sounds really fun. I've never actually played this game. It's like chess, there's like a grid and different pieces sort of can move in different ways. But when you go to take a piece, there's like a battle that happens. And so you have to like fight for that piece. So like some pieces are better than others and would have an easier time taking a piece. But like you never really knew if you were going to actually take that piece. Because maybe the person was better than you at the fighting part. And so you wouldn't be able to take their piece, which is pretty sweet.
So what you're saying is you had all this planning down, but if you don't have the toughness to battle, you might not win.
It's kind of like wizard chess a little bit.
It is. That's what I thought when you said it too. I got all excited.
Yeah. And then the third game that was a major hit was Pinball Construction Set, which is exactly what it sounds like. You could build your own pinball tables, and that's sweet. That
is really sweet, and that seems really ahead of its time.
Yeah.
For 1983.
Yeah, being able to create your own stuff. Yeah. So you make pinball tables and you play pinball games. Sounds great. So at this point, they had 3 hits on their hands. They hit overdrive, and they just kept cranking the stuff out. They made dozens of games for the Apple II, Commodore 64, and the Atari 800. The video game crash was still affecting stuff at this point. It was affecting computer games, but not quite as much as the console crash had, mostly for reasons we've already explained. Computers did more than just play video games, so people could buy games for them, and it wasn't like buying a thing for a dying platform.
They could do math.
Yeah, they could do math, and they could keep track of their recipes, and they could connect to bulletin board systems.
Type stuff.
Yeah.
Word processing.
You could print your master's thesis on it.
Yeah, you could. A dot matrix printer. Look all sweet.
That's what my mom, she has a master's in counseling, and she printed her master's thesis on a dot matrix printer that they joke about was the reason she married my dad, because he had an Apple II. And she's like, I need a computer to type this thing.
I just learned something today. You know what I learned?
What'd you learn?
Your parents are the most adorable couple I've ever heard of in my entire life.
They're pretty great. I'm
pretty awesome.
Big fan of my parents. Yeah, the printer, the dot matrix printer with like the way they work is like they move back and forth really fast and they like shake. And so when my mom was printing out her, I don't know, tens of pages, I don't know how long this thesis was, but like the whole house would like shake as the printer, because it has to go over each line like a bunch of times. Like printing a whole page took like a solid minute.
I love it.
So it was like take hours to print this stuff out. So anyway, enough of the tangent about my family.
Honestly, I kind of want a whole Your Family biographical episode now.
Yeah, well, great mustaches.
Great mustaches, Jaybird, dot matrix printers.
That's right.
I think we just teased the perfect Lifetime movie. But there's no tragedy. It's all good. It's just all good.
So at this point in time, they pivoted from promoting designers into promoting the games themselves. They didn't like hide the designers the way Atari would, but their marketing strategy stopped revolving around like talking about who made the game and more about the game themselves. And now it was all about those celebrity endorsements.
Ooh, this was really interesting to me. I never knew about this.
Yeah. They started making sports games with real players on the box, which seems simple, like obvious now, but at the time nobody did it. They made Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one, so that tells you what time frame.
Very long title.
Yeah. So it was like a basketball game. It was fine for what it was, but it was the first time a licensed sports game used actual players in the title and marketing. There had been like sports games before that were like officially licensed, NFL game, whatever, but they didn't use players in the game or in the marketing or anything like that. So yeah, the Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one was a fine game. It had some pretty good graphics, the sound and gameplay. It was all fun. But what this really led to was getting in touch with John Madden. And we all know how that turned out.
Pretty good.
Pretty good for them. Pretty good for everybody involved.
Pretty good, like billions of dollars good.
Yeah, they make a new Madden game every year, and everybody buys it.
Yeah.
And they've been making Madden games every year since like the 80s. So.
I watched a YouTube video on it was like a little documentary about those Madden tournaments.
Oh yeah.
Man, those are hardcore.
Oh yeah.
People are into it.
That's interesting. I wonder how different. So watching a game of football, right? What the difference is when you watch people play a Madden game? Because I feel like the skills you're watching for are different than what you're watching for in an actual football game.
From what I gathered, and this is just me watching it, it's a lot about clock control.
Really?
Like if you're ahead, you are trying to burn that clock as fast as you can to make them like not have enough time to even catch up to you. Because it is, I mean, and again, I'm sure someone knows a lot more about Madden than I do, but if I'm going off of me having Madden 2004 for PlayStation 2 and my brother and I playing it together, it was scoring back and forth, and then the time would run out and whoever was ahead was ahead.
Yeah.
So I feel like if it's the same as it is now, which I'm sure it isn't, and I'm sure there's other variables, it did seem like, oh, he's running the clock down now because he's 2 touchdowns ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it would just be interesting to watch and like learn what the strategies are and how close they are to playing actual football versus like what are the strategies that people use to win at Madden, which maybe is different, right?
Yeah,
I would just be very interested.
It's also
in
just
that.
interesting to look at the difference between like the esports culture of a Madden game versus a League of Legends or Counter-Strike or just a shooter in general.
Yeah.
Very different crowds.
Yeah, I saw at E3 they had some Madden esports guy like promoting their next Madden game or something, and they kind of did a little video about him and his story, I think, and it sounded like he played sports already, like he was either a baseball player or a football player or something, and he got injured, and so then he started playing tons of Madden and getting really good at playing Madden while he was waiting for like his ACL to heal or something like that, but he couldn't play sports anymore. So it's like it's like a sports person playing a sports game, which would be different from a guy like me who has no football experience, like playing a football game. Like it's just
Telling That Man's Story is the second Lifetime movie we've pitched this episode.
Yeah, we are pretty strong on
pretty
Lifetime
strong
movies.
on making those spec scripts.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's not a spec script. It's just
So the next part I want to move into is trouble at Commodore. There was a bailout investor named Irving Gould who was still pulling the strings at Commodore. He was keeping really close tabs on Tramiel. Tramiel? How do we start saying his name?
I wanted to say it was Tramiel.
Tramiel?
But
okay.
That's just me freestyling. I only maybe said that because I didn't want to call him Tamriel again, like Elder Scrolls. So I think Tramiel, though, it's an IE, so Tramiel?
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Tramiel. 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 So in 1984, Tramiel threatened to quit when he was told he couldn't bring in his sons to take over the company for him. He was like, I want my sons to run Commodore. And Irving Gould was like, nah. And so Tramiel was like, I'm going to quit then, which he had done several times in the past. And it had worked for him. He'd be like, I'm going to quit. And they had been like, all right, fine, whatever you want. Well, this time Gould was like, fine. And Tramiel left. So they brought in Marshall Smith, a finance specialist from the steel industry.
Oh, this pattern, this upsetting pattern.
Yeah.
Of people working in the video game industry that are executives from things that are completely unrelated.
Yep. So they brought in the steel industry guy, and he is now in charge of Commodore. Let's switch lanes here and go to trouble at Atari. It was really heating up at Atari. Also, James Morgan took over for Kassar in 1983, and the company was like pretty much destroyed by that time. The video game crash had really just screwed up a lot of stuff for them. Atari was in this mode of, it was just like a classic big company syndrome. They had lots of smaller divisions working independently without any communication between them. They had almost 50 buildings, all with different departments in them, and these departments just couldn't get along. Like they were competing with each other, and it was just really not a great scene. So James Morgan takes over, and he laid off over half the company. He downsized from almost 10,000 employees to about 3,500. 3,000 of those jobs that were laid off were like exported to Hong Kong and Taiwan because they were manufacturing jobs. And then he sold almost every building they had, bringing the total of buildings from 50 to 4, hoping that would help the groups that still existed work together a little bit better.
Also, I think we mentioned this in a couple last chapter too. They mentioned this twice in the book, but we thought it was important to say too.
The layoffs?
The layoffs.
Oh,
but they didn't talk about the buildings. This is now we're talking about the buildings.
Yeah.
Because they kind of, wait, just so you know, if you're like, hey, you guys are repeating yourselves. Yeah, we are. But it's very important.
It's important because James Morgan's going to do some stuff here.
Yeah.
So after he made all these changes and he made all these big cuts, he submitted his budget to the big wigs at Warner. And Warner was like, haha, good luck with that. You're not getting any money from us. You're on your own. So he continued to cut expenses, but he knew you can't just cut expenses to save a company. You got to put out a product that people want to buy. We need a new product. The 5200's not doing great. Let's put out the 7800.
It's got a higher number. It's going to be better.
It's got the bigger GBs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a higher number. It's definitely better. And it was, technically better. The 7800 was the next console that Atari released in, I want to say 1983. I don't have that in my notes, but I think it's 1983.
I think you're right. It's 83,
yeah.
I think.
This device was built by General Computer. These are the homies that made Ms. Pac-Man and those expansion boards.
That was one of my favorite little side things in this chapter was this fact, because it might be my fact of the episode, because I love that these guys just keep going up and up, and it all started with them making these boards, and now they're building a system for Atari. It's so cool.
General Computer on their way up, yeah. So they made the 7800 because Atari couldn't do them themselves after firing half the company. So they had a new system. That's cool. They also announced a new controller called MindLink. It was supposedly reading your brain impulses and translating those into movement in the game.
Whoa.
Really what it was doing was picking up on your eyebrow movements, and you were just controlling the game with your eyebrow, and people just got headaches from trying to control games with their eyebrows.
My eyebrows hurt.
Yeah.
I should also, correction, Atari 7800 came out in 1986.
Oh, 86.
Yeah.
Okay.
3 years out. It was close. I mean, I just wanted to make sure we had a hard date on that. So.
Good call.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. MindLink never came out, so that's one thing that failed. They built and failed, so it never came out. A MindLink?
Yeah, you think they sell them somewhere?
I don't know. They never came out.
They never came out, but there's got to be some sort of
maybe
Atari guy that's like, I don't want this anymore.
There was no games for them.
It's in my garage. My eyebrows hurt. Mindfreak has no games.
So at this point, Atari posted nearly $500 million in losses.
Yeesh.
And Warner was like, nah. They were not about that life, so they started floating the idea to maybe just sell Atari and be done with it. James Morgan was trying to reassure his buddies at Atari. He was like, hey, look, nobody's getting sold. Nobody's going to get left behind. He was like Woody in Toy Story, you know? Nobody's going to get left behind.
Andy loves you.
Yeah. He was incorrect.
In this case, Andy was the consumer.
That's right. And the consumer is not as passionate as Andy was about his toys. So somebody bought Atari.
Who bought Atari, Tyler?
Jack Tramiel.
Whoa. If I had an air horn right now, I'd be blowing it. Yeah,
the former Commodore owner who couldn't bring his sons in to run Commodore and was kicked out of Commodore. He's like, guess what? I'm going to buy Atari. Let's do this, boys. That's what he called his sons, boys, I assume.
Come on, boys. But he actually meant it, not like in a mobster sort of way.
Right.
Like, these are my brood.
Boys. Yeah, these are my children. So he bought everything but the coin-op division of Atari, which stayed with Warner, and because that one was still doing okay, I guess. And they renamed it Atari Games, which is not confusing at all. So Warner
totally
owned some Atari. Jack owned some Atari. It's not super clear why Tramiel wanted Atari, but because the company was failing and it didn't even have great brand recognition anymore. It wasn't like you said Atari, and that really meant quality, you know? So some people think it was because he wanted revenge for what happened to him at Commodore. Some think he really just wanted to get his sons into this industry, and this was a way to do that.
Well, I remember, a little aside here, wasn't one of his sons, like, he had 2 businessy sons, but then one of them was like a really talented engineer.
Yeah.
And he was like, I want to have him make games because he's really good at it.
Yeah. So he really wanted to do this.
Jack Tramiel for just being a good dad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jack and Sam Tramiel really went hard in the paint here.
Good basketball terminology.
Thanks. I played a lot of Dr. J and Larry Bird Go 1-on-1. That's not true. I've never played that game.
No, stick to it. Commit to the bit.
So they came in and they did not care about hurting anybody's feelings, and they were relentless in their payroll reduction. So they reduced the company to just 1,500 people. The folks at the coin-op portion were still like there and still kind of working near them. They were very happy to not be a part of the great Atari fire sale of 1984. Jack and Sam Tramiel just went to town like gutting this thing. General Computer even.
He may have been a good dad, but now I take back all the stuff I said before about him being a good dad because he's firing a lot of people.
He's firing a lot of people for the greater good of the company.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
We're not business folk.
That's not a decision that I will probably ever have to make, and I'm glad of that.
mean, when Codex History of Video Games LLC gets founded and we go public, which is, I'm thinking like the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to have to make kind of decisions like that. But
that's true. We'll have to fire half our staff.
Yeah, so one of us is going to be gone.
At this point, General Computer even got spooked, and they started making games for the Mac, which had come out earlier that year in 1984.
This is different than the Apple II. This is the original Mac.
Yeah, the Macintosh computer.
I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, Tramiel really thought he could turn Atari around. He couldn't.
Oh.
It really just didn't work out for them, which really sucked.
That's where we leave off on Atari, right?
That is where we leave off with Atari. But I do want to talk a little bit about a little thing called Nemo, which was a neat idea for getting games over cable, spearheaded by Nolan Bushnell and his new company, Axelon. They partnered with Hasbro to make this Nemo thing, which was pretty cool. They want basically the idea behind Nemo was the ColecoVision had this really neat feature that nobody ever used that allowed them to basically put games over a video signal being put into the console, which is neat.
That's cool.
So Nemo was like, oh, we can do something with this, right? We can make something cool. Partner with Hasbro. The relationship was pretty strained because there were a lot of problems, but they did eventually make a game called Night Trap, which is sort of a famous and controversial game about vampires attacking teenage girls during a slumber party.
It's always a creepy angle in the early stages.
Yeah, it was pretty creepy.
Why couldn't it just be you kill vampires and not just take the slumber party thing out of it?
Yeah. The whole point here was to watch these even weirder is to watch the security cameras of the slumber party and watch for the vampires and set up traps for the vampires so that you could keep the girls at the slumber party alive.
In a way, you're protecting them, so I guess it's not. But it's still weird.
Yeah, it's still weird.
Why couldn't you just make a game where you're fighting zombies or something?
Yeah.
Although we're not in zombies yet.
That's later on. Yeah. They also made another game called Sewer Shark that never came out. The Nemo versions of these games never came out. Nemo never came out. That was not a thing that ever happened. But they did lay dormant for a few years. They thought about doing them as Laserdisc games, like Dragon Slayer. But the Laserdisc movie game thing sort of fad had ended. And those kinds of games weren't doing that well. The technology just wasn't there yet. Basically, the hard part is how do you store this much video to have enough video for a video game? In a format that people can use that's not clunky. Do you put them on VHS tapes? Maybe you get 2 hours out of that, but you can't really skip around on a VHS tape.
I have an idea. Okay. We had a party, listener, at Tyler's house where we played Until Dawn.
Uh-huh.
You and I.
It was great.
Find a copy of this game.
Of Night Trap?
Of Night Trap. And we say, hey guys, to our friends, there's this brand new game that just came out. It's called Night Trap. It's amazing. It's supposed to be like Until Dawn 2. Until Dawner. That's what it's like,
Until Dusk.
That's better. Thank you. And then they come over and we just start playing this terrible game and see how long they last.
Yeah, it did actually. So recently, the game did eventually come out on the Sega CD, Night Trap. Oh. So they did release Night Trap on Sega CD. It's actually on Steam now. They did a remaster of it because it's so famously controversial.
So we could have a party.
We could, yeah. It's controversial in that teenage girls watch them security cams. It's kind of weird. and like vampires, and it was like kind of violent too. And this was like the late 80s, early 90s when we were really in this like, oh, are violent video games turning children into murderers kind of phase of like, case in point, Night Trap. Look at what you do in this game.
Having a horrible resurgence now, so that's great.
Well,
but we're not there yet.
We are not there yet. Anyway, so Night Trap is the thing we could do. It's on Steam. I think it got a remaster. It's like famous now, and it's like not even that bad.
But the Steam summer sale, it's on sale right now.
Oh, you
do you want to look it up? I'm gonna look it up right now.
All right,
you keep talking.
So at this point, Atari's not doing great. Commodore's not doing great. Apple's doing okay because they make a computer that people use for computery stuff. A lot of companies not doing great, but there is something else ahead on the horizon. Something else brewing. Not a video game system, an entertainment system.
Ooh, interesting.
Made by a Japanese company that we've already talked about. Nintendo.
So we're talking about a Nintendo Entertainment System.
Indeed we are.
I wonder if they'd shorten that to an abbreviation of some kind.
I would call it NES, probably.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
By the way, if you want Night Trap, it's on Steam right now for $14.99.
Great.
Oh, look, they have a preview. This is actually great. Like the fashion is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. It's like real
it's
80s.
Super 80s. This is pretty ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, next week.
That's what we're covering next week is this Nintendo Entertainment System. They're very careful to not call things video games.
I wonder if they'll have like a game about like a quail hunt or
pheasants.
A pheasant bow shooting thing.
Yeah.
It'll probably be like a cat that laughs at you.
Yeah, probably.
In the
very
grass.
Excited. I'm excited.
I'm stoked.
We'll dig into this.
Hey, Tyler.
What?
What have you been playing?
Lots of Destiny 2.
Yeah,
Still
you have.
Playing a lot of Destiny. I finished Splinter Cell Double Agent.
Ooh.
The original Xbox One, not the 360 one, so it's a very different game. So now I'm on to Splinter Cell Conviction, which I started, haven't really played a whole lot of. From what I gather, Splinter Cell Conviction is not very stealthy. It's really more of a John Wick simulator, which I'm cool with.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
You saw John Wick, right?
I did. I saw both of them.
Yeah.
Great movies.
Good. Yeah, fun.
So I'm happy to play Sam Fisher as John Wick. And this will be, I'm just real excited for it. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Just Destiny and that. What have you been playing?
I purchased a Nintendo 2DS Pikachu edition.
Yes.
And Pokemon Ultra Moon, and I'm just having a flashback to my childhood, and it's been so fun. I was on a trip. I was in Spokane Comedy Club. It was great. It was fun. Spokane's wonderful. I highly suggest you go. Check it out. But I played so much Nintendo 2DS Pokemon. I kept wanting to call it Game Boy. Like, I still said Game Boy, and my friends like, don't. It's not a Game Boy anymore.
It hasn't been a Game Boy since 2001.
Yeah, but it's really like they've done so much to those games, those Pokemon games. It's just super great.
Yeah, they're still the same core of what makes Pokemon game fun, but like a lot of quality of life stuff added on top. It's not quite as tedious to do a lot of the things.
Yeah, and I think they definitely made it, because I remember when I was a kid, I would get stuck at parts, and you don't get stuck anymore, but there's just so much to do, including filling out that Pokedex. And now I'm learning about like these other Pokemon. Like I could have a conversation with like a 8-year-old kid now and know what they're talking about with Pokemon.
That's great.
Because people would be like, hey, what's this Pokemon? And that was me, just not knowing what the Pokemon was to this kid who has like the cards. And I'm like, I have no idea what this is. I'm specifically talking about my like nephews, by the way, not just a random kid on the street. I should have led with that. But yeah, it's really fun. I've been liking that. And then you informed me about Destiny 2 having a triple Valor.
Oh yeah, weekend. Triple Valor weekend. So
yeah, so I started playing that. It's been fun.
Plus, they announced those Triumphs things, and I'm trying to get enough points so I can get the T-shirt.
That's the important thing, because I got the first T-shirt, and I'm going to feel like a real schlub if I don't get the second one.
I really want this T-shirt.
Which means I'm probably going to now buy Forsaken on 2 different platforms, which is going to happen, because I don't think I can do it all on PC. It would be a lot to do on one character, I think. So I've done most of it already on
I think you can get enough points before Forsaken comes out. You could do it. I don't think you have to buy Forsaken to do the thing.
Oh, like is there a deadline for the shirt though? There wasn't a deadline for the shirt for one.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that so you can start doing Triumphs after July 31st. Or which is when they make it into the game, I guess. That's when the Solstice of Heroes starts. So you can get all your points then, and then you get the shirt then. I think you can do. I don't think you have to buy Forsaken, so you could probably still get your shirt on Xbox and then just buy Forsaken on PC.
That's what I really want to do, because everybody, I think I'm switching over, just full on.
Yes.
Sorry to all my Xbox people, and by that I mean all 2 of you.
Join us.
But yeah, I'm going to join the PC party with Tyler. It'll be fun. So, and also, yeah, the whole Discord thing
Yeah.
is just really amazing.
Discord's
If you know,
great.
like, I didn't know about Discord. I was dumb about Discord until like months ago, and now Tyler's shown me the way. And oh my gosh, way to find people that are cool playing the game.
Yeah, I also found some real jerks playing the game.
Yeah, but most of them are cool, right?
Yeah, most of the 2 of the 3 groups of random people I've run with have been very cool.
Doing a Destiny raid with randos feels good because it gives you hope for humanity.
It really does.
We're all coming together. It's like if they threw you and 5 other people in an escape room somewhere and you actually solved it. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's very fun.
So, yeah. But next week, we're kind of getting into, like, I think kind of our childhoods now.
We're
Right?
going to be moving into the NES.
I'm so
It's
excited.
very
Speaking
exciting.
of which, I saw a classic one of those at Walmart.
Oh, I need to check
near
the Target
me.
here.
And yeah, we should just make a run one night and go check those out because they're showing. I think they have more stock of both the SNES and the NES ones going in, right?
Awesome. Yes.
So yeah, I need to get that. I don't know if I can leave mine in the box though, like a collection thing. I think I'm gonna have to take it out of the box. and
Yeah.
play
Well, I have mine hooked up now. I didn't stay in the box for very long.
it. Yeah, it's too fun.
My Super Nintendo one, I should say. I don't have the NES one.
Also, as always, you can tweet at me Coletta. That's MECOLETTA. You can tweet at Tyler at Sneaker Elf, which is SNEAKERELPH.
Yes, got it.
Nailed it. You can also email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And most importantly, if you could leave us a review on iTunes, preferably 5 stars. That's what we really would want.
If you feel the need to leave a lower star review, you
We
can
want-
do that.
we just
Please,
want a
you
good
could just
reason.
contact us directly.
Because we are always looking for ways to improve the
Yeah,
show.
it's not that we don't want to hear criticism. It's just that it makes it difficult for us to gain traction. If we
Yeah,
have.
we're trying to get some traction, get some people to
So
listen.
if you have constructive criticism that you'd like to send to us, that you think there's stuff we could do better, we will absolutely listen to it. Please send that to codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, just don't give us 1 star and then be like, it could be better. That would just bum me out.
Yeah.
And then we just think you're some jerk on Discord.
Right.
We don't want that. Also, I think that's it.
Yeah,
I think we've
that's
done it.
I think we did it.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode today.
And we'll see you next week. We talk about the NES. That chapter is called "We Tried to Keep from Laughing."
Cliffhanger.